some of the lowest volume roads, some of the best shoulders and awesome vistas. And we've got some ridiculous single track through overgrowth forest and translating our Forest Service roads into single track. That's actually on a stump. Beautiful views of the Cascades, and as you guys know, Central Oregon has some pretty cool mountain bike networks right outside of Bend. Since I spoke with you guys about a year ago, we've been really hard at work, just giving you some context to where this survey kind of fits into our scheme of things. We've been working really hard on our Scenic Bikeways program. We're just about to add 3 more routes for a total of 12 routes in the system. We've been working at the community level to help them understand the bike travel market and how to make decisions about business development, infrastructure, and marketing, helping guide their decision-making and investments. We've been working with entrepreneurs who are taking pheasant hunting ranches out in eastern Oregon, turning them into adventure cycling centers. We're developing a bike-friendly business program that is specific to the travel industry, which is taking up rather well with our businesses around our scenic bikeways. And we've been ramping up our marketing. So this is the debut of the Oregon Scenic Bikeways in Times Square last summer. But one of the things that's come to our attention over the last few years as we've made investments and initiated programs is that we really need to understand who the bike travel market is in Oregon if we're going to get more sophisticated around our efforts. And we've been asked by partners in the industry and across Oregon, our state partners, our local partners, to really help them understand who these folks are and what economic impact they have. Now, I'm sure as many of you guys have used, just like we do, the Outdoor Industry Association report. The most recent one shows that all of cycling rates about 3rd in terms of participation rate. We also know that it's jumped up as the 2nd highest outdoor recreation activity in terms of frequency of participation, with cyclists making 2.4 billion outings a year, which is pretty significant. And we've known that over a quarter of all Americans bike. And we know that for every car sold, 3 bikes are sold. And we also know from this study that more Americans bike than golf, ski, and play tennis combined. Which is news to some of our destination marketing friends. So when we did an initial cut looking at bike travelers in 2011, we realized that about a quarter of our visitors were coming to Oregon and they were getting on a bike. And about a quarter of those folks were actually planning to bike before they came. So we knew that we had a real notion in people's minds who wanted to get out and ride. And so that led us to the bicycle travel study. And I am not a researcher. I am just presenting the story of the data, which we received on Wednesday. And I do not have all the answers to your questions, but I'll give you sort of a sampling of the data. And for Jonathan Moss and other media in the room, just like Charles said, we have not released the official final study yet, so these numbers are preliminary. They are possibly likely to change in some regards as we continue the regression analysis, etc.
Are you telling us not to tweet?
Yeah, you can tweet, I don't care, but it's good enough for now. But just so you guys understand how we did this survey, we essentially did an online SurveyMonkey Zoomerang survey that included over 45 different questions for cyclists. And we reached out through our social media networks, and I realize you can't read all this. This was us documenting every time. We basically documented impressions every time we were able to get the survey in front of a different set of eyeballs. And we utilized our network of friends in the bike tour world, Path Less Pedaled, Jonathan Moss, Bikes Belong, IMBA, to really get the survey out there, making sure that we reached every audience that we possibly could from every discipline. And we were able to get over 5,000 responses, completed surveys. That's huge for us. So we realized that the survey data is biased. Pretty much every survey you're going to do will be biased. These are people who like to bike and who answered yes to, I biked in Oregon on a bicycle trip in 2011 or 2012. We've done the analysis to cover essentially a year, so I'll be talking about things on an annual basis. What's interesting about this study is that we really got granular with the types of cycling. So a lot of the data I'll present will actually be grouped and lumped into some larger categories, but this is what we actually asked on the survey. So we have really specific information about the different types of people doing sanctioned road races, organized group tours, independent bicycle touring, whether that was road or mountain. And then of course we asked about day road rides and day mountain bike rides, and then as a recreational activity on a trip. So that meant you're not really identifying with one of those sort of specific markets, like I am this, I am the day road rider, but you're saying, you know what, our family went on a trip and we brought our bikes and we went biking. And I'm telling you this because this becomes an important part of the story. But what I do want to say is that we asked the question about primary reason. Was cycling a primary reason or one of several reasons for the trip? And that's really important. So all of the data that I'm going to share with you are the people that marked one of those two categories. So we have a whole nother set of data about people who did come to Oregon and they did get on a bike, but that wasn't one of the reasons that they came, or it wasn't one of the reasons for their trip. So we can look at that data another time if we want to talk about that. Now the other thing I'll talk about trips, and the average party size that we found when people were getting out and taking a trip, they were usually rolling with a group. They were either going with their family, but more importantly with their friends. And we see that much higher with the bicycle travel segment than we do with other travel segments in terms of going out with your buddies. And then I'm going to make some distinctions throughout the data between overnight and day trips. And something to be really conscious of in travel studies is there's a common national definition of travel. So it's either overnight for leisure, or it's a day trip that's 50 miles or more from your home, okay? So we are not studying the bike commuting phenomena. We're studying the folks who are essentially moving their dollars around when they travel. So they're leaving home and they're traveling at least 50 miles away to recreate. And that's what we're calling travel. And of course you can poke all kinds of holes at that definition, and I understand that, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. Party trips by type. So essentially, you do the, and I meant to mention one more thing. We took this survey data and then basically our research firm took it and compared it against a household survey. And we tried to eliminate some of the bias by looking at sort of a national standard survey. So that informs some of the responses that you'll see. And I better get going here on my time. So, party trips by type. I'm going to throw up some slides with lots of numbers, and then I'm going to talk about the story a little bit and some exploding pie charts, which you're going to love. So, you can see that as a recreational activity, something you did with your family, it wasn't necessarily, you're not identifying with that hardcore enthusiast. They actually went out overall. And this is kind of how they measure up. Proportionally, as a recreational activity, was about 34%, and day road riders came in second with, 26%. And you can kind of see how it shakes out with some of the other categories being fairly equal around the 7 to 9% range, with other cycling events coming in last. Now we asked them a lot about what they spent their money on. So average trip expenditures, and we asked the overnight visitors versus the day trippers what they were spending money on and how much exactly. And I'll get into some of the categories of spending in a second. But we also broke down the overnight trips by type of lodging. So you can see the difference of folks who stayed in campgrounds versus the folks who stayed in commercial lodging. So the highest number are the folks who are obviously staying in commercial lodging, and out of that, the organized group tour riders were spending the most, down to the independent bicycle touring coming in third, which is actually significantly higher than we would have expected them to rate out in terms of across the disciplines. And then if you get over into the day trippers, it's the organized, non-competitive group riders who are spending the most amount of money. So if you look at this as a total trip expenditure by discipline, again, you'll see the recreational activity coming out on top with roughly $130 million of impact. Day road riders coming in at $53 million. And down to the day mountain bike riders at about $22.7 million, which I realize are at the bottom, but that's a significant impact. So what we are going to be able to do is obviously take any one of these segments and be able to tell the story of any one of those disciplines. Now, these are the categories that we looked at for spending. So if you want to talk about business, this is it. This is how the dollar gets spread around. We don't have a jobs number yet. I'm sure we'll get to one. But you can see what they're spending between accommodations, restaurants, bicycle repairs, clothing, etc., bicycle event fees. And you can actually just kind of get granular and see, in the millions what that impact is. Now, if you look at it between the overnight visitor and the day tripper, overnighters are going to be spending about a quarter of their expenditures on accommodations, which I think is fairly straightforward. They're spending the night. But second to that is restaurant and bars, and third to that is transportation. So those things are going back into the local economy, minus the transportation probably. But what was interesting to us is that the bicycle-related repairs and clothing and gear came in at 6%, and all other retail was a little bit lower. So they're not spending as much on retail as we had thought from some of our earlier studies. And then the day category, number one, guess what? Food and beer! here was up at close to 30%, and second down from that was transportation. And you have to remember that that's because they're traveling at least 50 miles away from home for that recreational activity. And then you can see third down is bicycle event fees. Now, if you look at day versus overnight in terms of impact, we were actually pretty shocked. Some of our other travel segments, you don't see quite this disparity, but you see about a 19 times the impact with your overnight travelers. And that's people who are traveling 2 or more days. They're all lumped together. But you can understand that if a community can start to translate that overnight stay, they're going to be benefiting more, spreading more of those dollars around the community. Now, who responded to our survey? Of course, we asked all kinds of demographic information. 73% were from Oregon. I gotta go fast. Okay. Who are they? We got all kinds of statistics. As you can imagine, 65% are men, very high income. We can do this across any discipline. So with mountain bike day riders, they're even more men. And who they are, other activities. So they're doing hiking, exploring the town, eating an establishment, visiting a farmer's market, and of course visiting a microbrewery at 60%. So I'll just lastly, but I did want to mention visiting wineries was the next one, which was 10% lower, so definitely more of a beer affiliation. But I'll leave it with the regional side just to close here. For us, understanding how these travel dollars are spread across the different regions will actually be the most important part of the study, because we can start to work with communities to understand kind of what their slice of the pie is. So these are expenditures by region. I realize it's not going to be all that relevant for you guys, but it is for our local communities. And the most interesting thing is if you look at economic impact, we have the most concentration in Central Oregon, but if you look at economic impact related to all travel spending, it's actually a bigger portion in the Mount Hood Gorge region around Hood River and Central Oregon, and it's much higher value activity in Willamette Valley, Southern and Eastern Oregon. So this information will give community leaders and economic development professionals more of a reason to start investing in these types of strategies. So I think I'll leave it with that, which is bike travel related impacts in Oregon came out to be about $325 million. And we are just starting on the bike manufacturing and retail study within the next 6 months. So we'll be able to add that to the impact, which I'm guessing will come out similar to New Jersey's at the end of the day. So, yeah.